The Paradine Case is a 1940s Alfred Hitchcock film set in a courtroom starring Gregory Peck, amongst others. Is it the most boring film we have ever covered on the podcast? Find out and more on the Golden Hour Film Podcast. Hello everybody and welcome back to the Golden Hour Film Podcast. Yes, a slightly more scathing intro than usual because, surprise, surprise, I'm just gonna pull back the I just thought this movie was so boring. I'm joined by my co-host, not guest host, Shay Mulvaney.
How you doing, Harry?
Great, because I don't have to watch the Paradine Case anymore. How are you?
Yeah, I watched it a few days ago and I'm not sure I've recovered. Not in a good way, I should say. It's not a good film. We'll just get
It's
into
a
it.
boring movie. Gregory Peck has been quoted, the star of the film was quoted as saying that even Hitchcock was bored making the film. It's just a boring affair. So, Shane, other than the Paradine Case, have you watched anything good recently?
We watched a couple of Richard Linklater films over the weekend. Ones that I haven't seen before. What else have I seen? Let me just scroll through my letterbox actually real quick while we're on here. I saw Logan actually, rewatched that. The Quick and the Dead is one I hadn't seen before. Sam Raimi from 1995. That's really good. I got a lot of enjoyment out of that. It's very fun. And I also saw JFK for the first time. I hadn't seen that before. And,
banger. What a film.
Yeah, certain recent events that have transpired, I've been meaning to watch it for a while, and yeah, that kind of gave me the kick up the bum I needed. Great film. Great film. What about you?
A few good ones, few not so good ones. I watched Brief Encounter for the first time, David Lean. That movie breaks your heart. I watched Boy Kills World, that new Bill Skarsgård film.
Yeah. Such
Potential, yet such bad execution.
Okay.
Skarsgård's good in it, but like the film is very irritating. They have a deaf mute action hero played by Bill Skarsgård, and do you know who does his voiceover for him?
It's the guy from Bob's Burgers, I think, isn't it?
It is. It's the guy from Bob's Burgers. It's such a stupid decision. It doesn't work. It's so bad. But like some of the action and stuff is cool. Like Mad Dog from The Raid is in it. So like there's some good stuff in there. Yeah. I watched Machete last night. Great film. Yeah, Robert Rodriguez. Absolutely stacked cast. Again, weirdly appropriate for this day and age with, Robert De Niro's character, the big racist political power getting shot by someone, but them failing to do the job. So, yeah, weirdly culturally relevant at the moment is Machete. And what else? Oh, I watched The Haunted Castle from the 1890s because someone on Reddit pointed out that we called 2 weeks ago's episode, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, the first ever horror film. It's the first ever horror feature film. You fucking idiots. We're so stupid. This short film from the 1800s is the first horror film. So I watched it, and yeah, it's exactly what you think. It was George Méliès, like the guy who basically did all the shorts at the time. Pretty much. Pretty revolutionary guy. So yeah, it's a bit of crack actually. I would watch it if I were you. It's like 4 minutes long. It's a bit of crack. But yeah, the Paradine Case. No surprises here. It was a box office bomb. Nobody involved seemingly particularly likes it. It's the last time David O. Selznick and Hitchcock worked together. Ironic that the lead character played by Gregory Peck is pretty controlling, I feel. And David O. Selznick behind the scenes was 10 times as controlling. Yeah. He basically wanted this to be his next Gone with the Wind and pumped money into the sets and stuff. And yeah, I don't want to say Hitchcock phoned it in. I feel like everyone sort of phoned it in. I think it's safe to say it just isn't a particularly exciting drama.
Except for Selznick, because apparently he got involved with like writing the script and a bunch of extra duties that you wouldn't usually get involved with. Because he wanted this to be such a success, and he didn't really want to also pay Hitchcock his usual fees for the extra kind of the extra stuff that you need to do to get this thing to a workable kind of film. So Selznick kind of interjected himself in a lot of these areas, and I think you can tell because it's just nowhere near as polished as it should be.
No, and of course it has the legendary Oscar-nominated performance from Ethel Barrymore. Who the fuck is Ethel Barrymore? When was she in this film at any point?
Do you know who she is? Guess she plays Charles Lawton's wife. And the reason for this,
Yeah, because
apparently,
I knew she wasn't any of the three most prominent female characters in the film. And then I found out that Ethel Barrymore, I thought it was a typo, got nominated for the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress for this film. I was like, who?
apparently what happened was, originally her part was a fair bit bigger, so kind of there's allusions in the film.
So they gave her the Oscar on the basis as to how good it could have been.
Well, apparently the cut that a lot of the Academy voters at the time were shown, she's in it a lot more. Apparently there's a couple of really good scenes with her and Gregory Peck, and another one with her and Charles Lawton. And obviously in the film it's alluded to that he's kind of a very controlling husband. She's very meek, she's very kind of timid. So apparently her performance in the original cut, or at least the cut that Academy voters were shown, or at least some of them, the ones that they kind of voted on, her part is a lot bigger. But then when we seen, I think she has like 4 minutes of screen time. So
yeah, most of it she's not even talking.
Yeah, she's not. She probably has like 5 or 6 lines on the actual cut of the film, if that.
Yeah. There's a few people turned this film down. Greta Garbo turned it down, allegedly, with O. Selznick having her in mind the entire time when he like even bought the rights to the novel that it's based on, just for her to turn it down. And Laurence Olivier turned it down as well. He did Hamlet instead, which is a far better film than this. And of course,
he wanted Bergman, Ingrid Bergman, and
did he?
Apparently, no. Look, Hitchcock probably wanted Bergman for every one of his roles. I think it was a little bit obsessed for her. Also, James Mason, who would go on to be in North by Northwest, the villain in North by Northwest, he was being considered for the role of Anthony Keane, but obviously he's a very good actor, But obviously then the part ended up going to Gregory Peck. But yeah, I think he would have done still done a good job in terms of what he could have done, but the role itself, there's not a lot to it, really, unfortunately.
No, and of course it's the customary thing that we say on every episode of the podcast. There was a radio remake starring Joseph Cotton, because of course there was. There's a radio remake to every film where Joseph Cotton just plays all the characters, it seems. And yeah, the Paradine case. Shane, give us a quick spoiler-free review of the Paradine case.
This is not a good film. Only watch this film if you are a Hitchcock completist. The case itself is way too... It's nowhere near interesting enough to sustain a 2-hour film. Like, originally, like a murder mystery, if you think of a murder mystery, it should be like a few different suspects splintered in there, kind of an ongoing investigation. Hitchcock and Selznick, whoever you want to blame for this thing, this is not that film. Basically, the film is entirely preoccupied with Anthony Keane, played by Gregory Peck, becoming infatuated with his client, who may or may not have killed her husband. That in itself could be a good story, but even then, the way it's written is just so boring. It's so drawn out.
Yeah,
it's not a good film. Spoiler alert, it's not a good film. What about you?
Yeah, no, I would agree. The actual Paradine case is this truly riveting case where a man has been poisoned.
Yeah.
Did his wife do it?
That's
yes or no?
Yeah.
that's the 2-hour-long case that we have here. Let's
there's a
we'll get into it.
I think we'll get into it. Yeah. I was going to say, but we'll get into it. We'll just get into it and get this over with.
Yeah. So set in London in the recent past, Inspector Ambrose visits Mrs. Paradine before her dinner. She's sat at a piano. There's a big portrait of a guy above her. That's actually a pretty good shot. And as we pan out and we discover that Ambrose is here to arrest her, because the man in the portrait, who is Mrs. Paradine's now late husband, has died. He's very dead, is the man in that picture. And her lawyer, Sir Simon, arrives. Basically, fills us all in on, he was a blind man, lots of money, and I'm not going to represent you in court. Best of luck. It's like, all right, Simon, sound.
Yeah, he says he's going to get Anthony Keane instead, who he thinks is the best kind of person for the job, especially if this thing goes to trial, which it likely will, since obviously she's up for murder and she's denying the fact that denying having killed him. So if she's going to plead not guilty, there's only one way this is going to turn out, which is obviously in a trial. So she's booked in and brought to her cell, and then there's a cool shot then, one of the only few cool shots I'd say in this film, where the door kind of slams behind her and she's there looking kind of ashen faced. And apparently this was inspired by Hitchcock, something that happened in his childhood where, I don't know, something happened when he was a kid, and basically he was brought into like a jail just to be there for an hour or two, I think, just to kind of cool off or whatever. But this kind of, he wanted to evoke those kind of feelings that he had at the time in Mrs. Paradine in this particular scene.
Yeah, and then we see good old Tony Keane, played by not Cary Grant, the other one, Gregory Peck, yeah, has arrived home from probably work, and yeah, it's just typical filler, finding out who him and his wife are. Oh, you win every case. It's all in a day's work. They hug, they walk up the stairs together. We find out he is going to be taking on the Paradine case, the titular Paradine case. And she's like, oh, maybe we should like go away for a while, go on a little break. And he's like, yeah, maybe. We'll see.
Yeah.
And we kind of revisit that conversation throughout the film, and it's getting progressively less we'll see. Let's just say that much.
Mrs. Paradine, no, sorry, not Mrs. Paradine. Mrs. Keane just thinks automatically that Mrs. Paradine must be innocent because she thinks that from what when she's met her before, she seems like a nice woman, and she says that nice people don't murder other nice people. So maybe that could be the plot of the film as to whether what could have, if she did kill him, what could have been the reason, obviously. So then that obviously then teases tension a little bit later on because maybe she'd come to realise that she's not who she thought she was.
Yeah, Keane then goes to visit Mrs. Paradine in prison the next day. And again, talking about teasing tension, she is asked by both Sir Simon and Keane, weren't you his eyes? Because obviously he was blind. And she said, yes, I had to be, which kind of alludes to the idea that, if she stopped being his eyes, something would happen to him. So, yeah, little sprinkles of tension in there that just sort of dissipate quite soon after, and all atmosphere in this film is kind of lost. But no matter. Basically, the whole idea of the film is, did she do it? Yes or no? Is Cary Grant's character, I keep calling him Cary Grant, is Gregory Peck's character just infatuated with her and ignoring the facts because Sir Simon is already convinced, I think she actually did do it. He's like, no, nobody that attractive can be a murderer. That's basically what he's saying.
Yeah, pretty much you can see he's like immediately kind of drawn to her, becomes obviously infatuated with her, but certainly like there's an instant physical attraction there. This is also the scene as well where they meet for the first time as kind of counsel and client. That we find out that people have been speculating that she killed him for his money. Obviously him being blind, so yeah, that could be a possible motive, I suppose.
Yeah, she's played by Alida Valli, who, it's her first performance. She is in way better films than this. She is fucking class in Suspiria. She's in Eyes Without a Face, which is an amazing horror film from France from 1960, I want to say. Great film. She's in The Third Man. Yeah. She is a quality actress, and this is not a quality film. Anyway, Keane and Simon then go to visit the judge, played by Charles Laughton, and he is... It must have been revisited in the longer cut because he's just like weirdly touchy-feely with Mrs. Keane, and then that never gets addressed again.
Yeah, he just sexually harasses her basically for a good couple of minutes.
And that doesn't go anywhere. It never gets brought up again in another scene.
Well, it's brought up in the sense of there's obviously a scene later on with his wife that I mentioned earlier, and there might have been a couple more of these kind of scenes sprinkled throughout the film that were cut out. But where he's clearly a man who is very powerful being a judge, and maybe he uses that power not just in the courtroom but in other facets of life. So he uses it with his wife. He's pretty much a very controlling husband. He controls a lot of her behaviours, and she's, like I said, a very timid kind of personality from what we see. And maybe this is his kind of attempt as well to assert a bit of dominance, a bit of control over obviously Keen's wife, who happens to be an acquaintance of his, and him and his wife.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they kind of, again, it's all fairly unnoteworthy conversation going on
I don't
between
really
all
know
the characters, I feel.
exactly. It feels like a bit of a, well, not bit. It's definitely a nonsense subplot because it doesn't go anywhere in the end. Like,
Yeah.
so you could
But
easily
even them visiting the judge, their conversations just feel filler.
Yeah.
There's very little to actually write home about. Like, after they visit the judge, because there's not much else to unpack from that other than that one subplot. Yeah, they have a conversation, the Keens. Basically, again, the same conversation about, oh, you need to take time off, with this case. And basically, Mr. Anthony Keene alludes a bit stronger this time now to the fact that maybe work is more important than his relationship with his wife. And has it always been? It's been alluded to that it hasn't always been more important than his wife. Therefore, everybody is now starting to come to the conclusion that maybe, possibly, probably, Anthony Keene is in love with this woman he's just met, who's on trial for murder, who he is representing.
Yeah. So Keene then goes and meets with Mrs. Paradine again, and he tells her that he needs to find out more about her character and her background to be able to kind of defend her in the best possible way. She obviously, though, seems, at this point, she seems pretty kind of reluctant to do this because maybe she's hiding something about her past or about certain events she doesn't want them to find out about. But he says, look, you need to tell me this. It's essential you tell me this. So she explains how she ran away with a married man who ended up being obviously Mr. Paradine, and that when they grew apart they had affairs, meaning that she says that he knew all about the fact that she would go off and kind of have liaisons with other men, and she seems to imply that he did the same thing, although whether that's true or not, who knows. But yeah, Keane obviously isn't too pleased to hear about this because he kind of has fallen for her a little bit. But that's kind of where they leave it for this. It's on a bit of a tense kind of note at the moment, at this particular point in the film.
Mm-hmm.
She seems to not really want to necessarily trust him. Doesn't know whether she can trust him at least. And he is kind of desperate for her to tell him as much as she can. That way he can do his job.
Yeah, so he goes back to Simon to go through the case again. There's a lot of just going back and forth between these characters. He goes back to Simon, and now at this point Simon's just like, I'm pretty sure she did it, actually. I'm quite sure she did it. Oh, sorry, I'm getting attacked by a fly. And it's gone. And yeah, Simon is like, no, I just don't think we can rule out the chance that she did it. And realistically, we have to prove with irrefutable proof that she didn't do it, because the I was gonna say the offense, but the other side are definitely gonna have a lot of concrete evidence that would, the prosecution would have a lot of evidence to suggest motive and to suggest that she did it, because there's very few facts at the moment that you can present to suggest that she maybe didn't do it. Like, pretty much everything's pointing to the fact that she may have probably done it so far. And Gregory Peck's character is not one bit pleased, and he's like, no. Basically, to paraphrase, like, she's just so hot. She's just so hot. There's no way she did it. Yeah. And his fucking wife is in the room, and she's gobsmacked at this. She's like, what?
Keane is desperate to go down a route of basically saying that Paradine committed suicide, and to do this he got his long-serving butler to assist him in this, basically assisted suicide. This is a theory that doesn't really have any weight, really. He's kind of he's like a rabbit.
Just keep alluding to it.
Yeah, exactly. He thinks that the more he says
maybe it's suicide.
It's like the more he says it, the more true it'll be. But obviously, there's not really any evidence to support that. Whereas the prosecution and the police, they think they have a couple of pieces of evidence that point towards her culpability. But yeah, his wife isn't too pleased when she walks in and finds him basically drooling all over her in a way.
Yeah, like it's irrecoverable. Like he's basically just like, she's just, have you seen her? Have you seen her? And the wife is just stood there with like a tray of drinks ready to walk in for them, and she's like, oh, we're out of soda water, by the way. And he's like, oh, normal water will do. Like, he's just like, ah, God damn it, Mr. Keane. It's so embarrassing. I'm embarrassed for you.
Yeah. So then Keane goes back and meets with Mrs. Paradine again. He then presents his theory that Andre Latour, who was the butler that I just mentioned, that Andre Latour helped Mr. Paradine take his own life. But he's obviously startled by how vociferously then that Mrs. Paradine defends Andre, saying that no, that's not true. And that immediately then sets his alarm bells ringing, because like, why would she kind of immediately jump to the defense of someone who technically certainly worked for her and her husband? You know what I mean? This is
and the irony here of the characters now, because I don't find Anthony Keane to be a likable character.
Not at all.
But the irony of this is, for the rest of the film, then he basically makes it his mission to prove that Latour did it. And she's pretty much like, no, there's no way. And he's like, oh, well, you're only saying that he didn't do it because he's hot. Like, that's your thing. You're the one doing that. No, Mr. Keane, you're the dickhead, actually.
Pot calling the cat
Well,
black.
actually, it kind of gets proven that it's more than just him or the dickheads. But you're the dickhead for now. The proven dickhead.
So Simon tells his daughter then that Keane wants to investigate Henley Hall, Paradine country house, a place called Henley Hall. And he's annoyed by his daughter's interest in the case, basically. And this is another example. Throughout the whole film, we have examples of like raging misogyny. And this is just another example where he basically thinks that it's improper for a woman to be taking interest in such things, basically like murder and these kinds of things. He thinks that basically she should just be a good little girl and kind of mind her own business and act like a lady.
Yeah.
But she,
go read a Miss Marple, you dick.
Exactly, yeah. So, but he also does admit that kind of Mrs. Paradine is fascinating, and his daughter thinks that Keane is in love, which she's friends with Mrs. Keane. So, yeah, I wonder where she got that idea from. So then Keane returns home, and Gay, his wife, says that she isn't feeling well, and basically she kind of urges him to go away with her to the holiday that they had planned. He was talking earlier about going to either Italy or Switzerland. But he insists that he can't. The case is too important. I need to finish this case. But she obviously knows that he's getting closer to Mrs. Paradine, so she's obviously a little bit worried about that, because her husband was clearly in love with another woman, and he knows that she's aware of this fact. So he says, look, he's going to find someone else for the case. A little bit of manipulation here, because he knows that ultimately she's going to cave in, I think. But he's like, look, I'll find someone else for the case. I'll bring it. But she's like, at this point, she's kind of relieved. She's like, look, the fact that you were even willing to offer that proves that maybe you're not as in love with her as I thought, or at least, you know what I mean? So finish the case.
You're only semi in love with her.
Exactly, look. It's recoverable, she thinks. So she's like, look, finish the case. You're the only one who can help her. You win all our cases, and then at the end of the case, then we can go away and we'll forget any of this ever happened. So that's when he goes to Henley House. He's looking for Andre Latour, the butler. So he checks him to a hotel nearby, and the maid, or the housekeeper of the hotel, he's kind of asking her questions without kind of tipping his hat, and he's like, oh yeah, did Mrs. Paradine ever come by? And she's like, oh yeah, she just kind of kept herself to herself. But she kind of says that she was a bit reclusive, so she didn't really interact with too many people. So obviously he's kind of a little bit kind of interested by this, because it's not someone that basically no one can provide a character reference for her, let's put it that way, because she was kind of a recluse when it came to actually socialising. So he goes on a horse cart, and he's on the way to Henley House, and he's talking to the guy who says that Andre is believed. This guy says that the butler is believed that he knows more about the case than he lets on. So they pull up to Henley House, and Keane pretends that he wants to rent the house, but Andre is immediately like, yeah, Mr. Keane, come in, I know who you are, come in. Not having any of his bullshit. So yeah, Keane's stopped right in his tracks. Whatever plan he had laid, it's quickly out the window thanks to Andre.
Yeah, nice gaff as well. Some good establishing shots. I quite like the establishing shot of the horse carriage pulling into the house, and then just some of the shots, the interior shots are quite cool. there's very little to praise about the film, I feel, but yeah, just whenever it's worth noting, I feel like they shot Henley Hall quite well, and yeah, basically he does a bit of roaming around. He sees this sort of ground floor terrace type area where Mr. Paradine used to sit and basically have it explained to him like how the day was and stuff, and then he does some more snooping around. Pretty much, he goes up to Mrs. Paradine's bedroom and is literally just like staring into her eyes in every picture of her in her bedroom, which he has pretty much broken into. Because I don't know if anyone actually knows he's in there. He's just kind of roaming around looking at all her stuff.
Yeah, there's a picture of him
And then
in like a nightgown, which he just cannot stop staring at.
yeah,
Absolutely
yeah,
infatuated with her.
yeah. So then he goes to his room, and who's that knocking on the window? It's Latour. He comes in, and basically they have a bit of a back and forth because good old Tony is a jealous wannabe boyfriend.
Well, just before that, so back at Mrs. Paradine's house, he spots Andre outside and he's like, right, Andre, bring me to the gardens, kind of tell me what you know. And Andre's like, yeah, okay. But when he gets outside, Andre's gone, so he's like, right, this dude knows something and he's not telling anyone. So yeah, he goes back to his house, and I'd say that scene then where he hears a knock on the door and he's kind of slowly going over to it, and then he opens the curtains and Andre's like standing there looking like a bit of a fucking madman maybe. That's probably the best like sequence in the film, and it's probably the most interesting the film at any point, because you obviously know that this Andre guy is someone of a person of interest at least, and the way Hitchcock kind of reveals him doesn't do anything to dissuade me at the time of the notion that this guy might actually have something to do with this after all.
Yeah, and pretty much Peck's character is trying to find out all he can about Latour and what it is that he knows, and he says that Mrs. Paradine is bad to the bone, which is not quite what I think he was expecting him to say. I think he was expecting them to be like star-crossed lovers, but no, Latour clearly is not a big fan of Mrs. Paradine.
Yeah, he basically calls her evil, and that like she's bad news, and stay away from her kind of thing, and don't get sucked into her lies, and that this kind of stuff. Says that she's basically implies that she's a devil. Yeah, so Keane obviously is in love with Mrs. Paradine, and he's not even trying to hide it anymore. So he calls Andre a dirty liar, a snake, and he orders him to leave. And Andre just says, "Look, I feel sorry for you because clearly she has you under her spell. So yeah, best of luck to you, pal."
She's not even doing a lot to have him under her spell either.
No.
This isn't a two-way thing. She's not like flirting with him or anything.
And she's not. Like,
he just like met her and fell in love with her and is just so damn bad for her. And she's just like, I'm not guilty.
She's just like, yeah, I didn't do this. Be a good lawyer for me. Go and find out who did this.
Yeah.
And no, she's not.
Yeah,
she's
and
not
he's
leading
just
him along.
busy fucking drooling over her.
No, she's not leading him along. She's not like planting little seeds for him. She's not doing
Not
any
at
of
all.
this stuff. He is literally just, for whatever reason, he's just fallen for this woman hard. And yeah, it's kind of hard to understand why really, apart from the fact that she is a good looking woman. So Keane then goes back again to visit Mrs. Paradine, and he says that, look, Andre's after behaving very strangely when I went to Henley House. He says that Latour hates him and he orders her to tell him everything, but she's like, why did you go to Henley House? I told you, don't go to Henley House. There's nothing to find out there. She's like, look, you've done exactly what I didn't want you to do. Give up the case so that I can find someone who's going to do a good job for me, because you're messing this whole thing up. And he's right. He's basically says, look, sorry. Okay, look, from now on, I'm going to do the best that I can. I'm going to defend you and I'm going to get you off this thing. So again, another tense scene between them where clearly neither of them, well, she's not too happy with him and he's so in love with her that he's letting his feelings get in the way of actually doing a good job. Then we cut to Gay and Judy, who's Simon's daughter. So they're friends, obviously, and they're having tea, but Gay is looking kind of distracted and she's looking a bit down and obviously sorry for herself because her husband is in love with another woman. So she, even at this point, she's still making excuses for Tony, being like, "Oh yeah, look, he's not actually. He'll find that he's still in love with me. He doesn't really have feelings for this woman. It's just like infatuation. It's just lust. Once he gets over this, once the case is over, will be fine. I don't really know why she's making excuses for him at this point, because like
I think at this point she's just desperate and she just wants to go away on this holiday.
Yeah, maybe she just needs a bit of a break, exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, Tony then comes home. We cut back to home, and Tony comes home. And the newspaper article is speculating on Tony's handling of the case. So apparently his handling of the case is starting to get whispered about, that maybe he's doing some strange things. He's visiting some strange people, and he's kind of making a bit of an arse of himself, really. So Gay admits that sometimes, look, I wish for the worst for Mrs. Paradine, because like, you're in love with this woman, and if she was out of the picture, in other words, basically, if Mrs. Paradine is found guilty of this crime, she's going to get the death penalty more than likely. So Gay is like, look, I'm not going to lie to you. I do kind of wish sometimes that she was found guilty and that she get the death penalty. That way you can just move on from her. We can move on as a marriage, as a couple. But then she's like, look, no, I actually don't want that. I want you to find her innocent. I want her to get off. Because then you'll understand that it's all just part of this ride, and you'll understand that actually it's me and you all along. You don't really have the kind of feelings for her that you think you do. She says, all I ask is that she lives so that the fight can be an even one. So basically, she just wants to fight for her husband at this point. She's willing to fight for him. And she says that Tony doesn't actually love her the way he thinks he loves her. So again, tension in the marriage, just as a tension in the relationship between Mrs. Paradine and Tony. So he's in a bit of a pickle between the two women in his life, even though one of them isn't actually interested in him at all, really, that we think of. He's absolutely obsessed with her, but she's, the two women in his life, if you want to call it that. He's not in a good place with either of them at this moment in time, really.
Yeah, so he's fairly heavily insinuating that that Gay wants the case to fail. And after she basically says, oh, that sort of heartfelt stuff, he calls it nonsense. That he's still trying to pretend like he's that the feelings aren't blatant and obvious. Because he's literally like been in her bedroom now at this point. Yeah. Like staring at her pictures like a big fucking creep, actually. I don't care how attractive you are, Gregory Peck. You're not pulling this character off, buddy. Well, no, his performance is fine. It's certainly nowhere near his best, but like, yeah, he's just he's a bang a Mr. and Mrs. Smith off this. The characters are not very likable.
No.
Although, like Gay seems like a lovely woman.
Yeah, Gay is like the most. Yeah, Gay, and Judy's like a supportive friend, so good for her. Like, but everyone else is like, it's hard to like any of them, really.
And so, the courtroom scene begins. It's about that fucking time. Sound that goddamn alarm. Leo G. Carroll has showed up on the podcast again.
Our boy
Leo G. Carroll is the prosecution. Hell yeah.
Did you see who's Tony Keane's co-counsel as well? John Williams, who is in... Well, he's been in a few Hitchcock films. Dial M for Murder. He's the police officer in that. He's been in a few Hitchcock films.
Let me get a look at this fella.
He has 0 lines in this film, which is so weird. I don't know if his part was cut or if it was just part of all along. He has literally no lines of dialogue, which is so weird, because John Williams is a very good actor, and he's been very, very good in several.
He's not even credited on Letterboxd.
No, it's such a weird.
What else was he in?
He's been in Dial M for Murder. He's been like, the policeman who's maybe knows a little bit more than he's letting on in Dial M for Murder. As far as I remember, he was in Foreign Correspondent. I could be wrong.
Oh yeah, he was in Sabrina and Witness for the Prosecution as well.
Yeah, he's in those. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, he's
very good actor.
He's Charles Lawton's best mate in Witness for the Prosecution, isn't he?
Correct. Yeah, correct. And he's also
he is a good actor.
He's the police officer in Dial M for Murder, like I said, who he's very good in that film and knows more than he's letting on.
He's a very good actor.
It's a pretty big role. Yeah, so it's just so weird that he's in this film and he's literally 0 lines of dialogue. Yeah, well, I wouldn't blame you, because it's literally like he's probably cut to about 5 times in the whole courtroom scene. But anyway, let's get back to the start of the courtroom scene. Yeah.
So Leo G. Carroll's character basically gives us the context of this truly riveting case. A man has been poisoned. Was it his wife? No. So basically, he went to bed with a glass of Burgundy. Part of the prosecution's argument is that this was a strange thing for him because he never really went to bed with a glass of Burgundy. He wanted it there waiting for him when he went to bed. Also, this glass of Burgundy was then cleaned and polished by someone when he woke up in the morning, which basically removed any sort of evidence or fingerprints or what have you. And basically, immediately into the courtroom, and Keane straight away just latches onto the Burgundy thing. And he's like, who wouldn't want a glass of Burgundy before bed? It's a nice bedtime drink, actually. And yeah, apparently that works. That's that argument gone. So we can't rely on that anymore. So then, yeah, I think my favorite shot of the film is when Latour gets called into the courtroom,
Yeah.
and the camera is fixated on Mrs. Paradine's face as he comes in the door behind her, and then the camera tracks her face with him walking behind her through the windows of it's the Old Bailey, isn't it? It's set in the Old Bailey, the courtroom.
Yeah.
And
The Old Bailey,
yeah, it's through the glass windows of the Old Bailey, and we see him walk up to the witness box. And yeah, that is, for me anyway, the best shot of the film. We find a few things out about him. He is a French-Canadian man. He served in the army with Mr. Paradine, the deceased, as well as being his servant. He calls him his best friend. He said he's the most important man in his life. And he is very offended at any insinuation that he did anything against this man because he is the greatest man who he ever knew.
Yeah. So Judge Horsfield and everyone then that night are in bed looking nervous and anxious. Basically, we cut to all the different various parties, and yeah, everyone's kind of agitated about this trial having started now. Then we cut back to Andre's testimony, and Andre says that Mrs. Paradine made up a lie by saying that Mrs. Paradine was wanting Andre to leave. Basically, he says that look, she just wanted to get rid of him from the house. So Tony cross-examines Andre, and basically he accuses Andre then of hating all women, not just Mrs. Paradine. Basically, implying that he's what we call an incel these days, I suppose. He says that reveals that Paradine bequeathed £3,500 in his will to Andre, basically trying to plant a little seed that, look, Andre knew he was getting this money as soon as Paradine died, so he wanted to speed up the process of getting that money, so he's like, right, I'm going to off my boss here. Tony reveals
the only thing
Paradine...
I'll say is the one that didn't make any sense to me, because like it's the same with her. Like, she's also getting an insane amount of cash in the will, so therefore that same motive also applies to her.
Again, Tony's like very blinkered in his...
Yeah.
He's so infatuated.
For a man who's never lost a case,
yeah,
he's clearly not taken on many cases. Because how he has never lost a case is beyond me.
Like, as we said earlier, the newspapers have been running stories about his handling of the case, so I think even they're getting with for the fact that this dude is like doing a bit of a shit job for his client. Yeah, exactly. He's not doing a very good job. We can see that anyway. He's clearly letting his feelings get in the way of doing a good job. But then Tony reveals that Paradine told Andre that he wished to be dead. So, Tony's kind of, again, trying to plant scenes that Andre helped either killed him for the money or else he helped him to kill himself because that was Paradine's wishes. Latour then lashes out on the stand and the jury aren't impressed. Obviously, hostile witness kind of thing, so Tony's kind of happy with this because it doesn't make Latour look very good at all. And then Tony again tries to establish Latour's lies, and he says that he actually establishes that Andre poisoned a dog from the Henley house a couple of years ago with the same poison that was used to kill Mr. Paradine. And then Andre lashes out again, and once again the jury in the courtroom aren't too impressed with this because obviously it looks like this guy is kind of hiding something. The fact that he had already poisoned someone, the fact that he was bequeathed this money in his will. So Tony's pretty satisfied with himself at this point in time, thinking that he's doing a good job, and that Andre looks complicit for the murder. And then court is adjourned, so then Tony rushes straight back to Mrs. Paradine in her cell. He doesn't even look at his wife, who's there, by the way, to support him. So Mrs. Paradine, though, is not impressed at all. She's like, I told you not to go after this guy. This guy has nothing to do with this case. So Tony says, look, maybe I was just an idiot who fell in love with you. And she's like kind of taken aback by this because maybe she knew, maybe she didn't, but she claims anyway to not know that he was infatuated with her. And she says that, well, he says that either Mr. Paradine poisoned himself, or she did it, or Latour did it. So one of the three things, either it's suicide, either it's murder, and one of the two of them did it, or else Latour helped him kill it. So one of these three people kind of killed Mr. Paradine anyway. And he says that, look, you can trust me. I'll put my feelings to one side. I'm not gonna let my kind of affection for you get in the way of this case. And she tells him, look, just don't destroy Andre Latour because he's got nothing to do with this case. So she's pretty emphatic about the fact that she does not want Andre getting dragged into this case, basically.
No. So it's referenced then that there was a big heated argument between Latour and the Paradines, between the three of them pretty much. And this was the sort of beginning of the chain reaction that caused the eventual death of Mr. Paradine. And pretty much Gregory Peck's character is going harsh on Latour again, despite Paradine's wishes, and is insinuating, no, you killed him. The argument stemmed from the argument stemmed from her telling him that you tried things on with her sexually. You tried to have your way with her sexually, and she told him. And Latour, in his defense, finally kind of cracks and says, no, she didn't tell him. He found out.
Tony's able to then get Latour to admit on the stand that he was having an affair with Mrs. Paradine. So this could work out in his favour, or it might not. It might give Mrs. Paradine motive to kill Mr. Paradine because he found out about this affair. Or it might give Andre motive to kill Mr. Paradine because Mr. Paradine found out about this affair. So yeah, he's unsure at this point then whether that's a mistake or not. But Latour then is basically dismissed from the stand. He actually, before that, he kind of says, look, I hated every moment with this woman. He says that he hated every moment. He hated having to lie to Mr. Paradine, and but the fact that he's committed perjury on the stand, obviously his whole testimony beforehand now is obviously proven to be a lie kind of thing. He was obviously denying the fact that there was any sexual relations between them, any kind of sexual relationship between him and Mrs. Paradine. That's now proven to be a lie. Tony's managed to get him to prove that that's a lie. So Tony says, look, you have to charge this guy with perjury. And since he's perjured himself on the stand by lying about all this stuff, who's to say he's not responsible for this as well? So he's gone against, just after speaking with her, he's now still gone behind Mrs. Paradine's wishes, and he's still going after Andre because he thinks that's his best chance of winning the case. So Latour then is dismissed from the stand, and he tries to make eye contact with Mrs. Paradine, but she's like very kind of coldly or coolly, however you want to look at it. Maybe it's a bit too difficult for her, maybe, but she doesn't make eye contact with him. She doesn't feel like obviously kind of engaging with him in that way, so she just doesn't look at him. Then Tony then tells the jury, look, you can't find her guilty. I've have to prove that this Latour guy is have to prove lying about everything on the stand. So he says, look, I had a bunch of witnesses I was going to bring in here to basically testify to her character, testify to her good kind of personality or good character. I'm not going to do that now. I've already proven that this Andre guy is a liar, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to call Mrs. Paradine to the stand, which obviously is not something that a defence lawyer would usually do. They would not usually call someone accused of murder to testify in their own trial. So everyone kind of gasps at this. It's not a usual tactic, and again comes back to is Tony kind of doing a good job, or is he letting his personal feelings get in the way and making him do stupid stuff basically. But everyone gasps at this. Everyone's obviously this wasn't expected. So Judge Horfield is distressed. Everyone is shocked, but then she gets up on the stand anyway, as her lawyer kind of asks, and she says, "Look, I was very poor when I was a child. I was very poor growing up, and then I was poor, and then I met Mr. Paradine, and we got married. So obviously she became a lot more wealthy then." And she says, "Look, she asked her husband to dismiss Andre because he could be a bit too familiar." So Tony's kind of pushing it and pushing it and pushing it at this point. She says that he took liberties, so we don't really know what that means, obviously. And Tony then tries to make it seem like Latour killed her husband because he was infatuated maybe with Mrs. Paradine, or that he was a bit obsessed with her, he wanted to be with her instead of Mr. Paradine. So she says, look, Andre didn't clean the glass on that night. I did. And then this obviously blows the whole case wide open.
Yeah. Yeah, she got rid of the evidence after her husband was murdered. Nice work, Anthony. You were literally in on goal, about to score the winner, and you've hit the post, and they've gone up, and now they're in on goal. Good job, buddy. Yeah, pretty much. She admits out of nowhere to cleaning the evidence that was beside the bed. And
yeah, it's very abrupt.
Yeah,
there's no real need for her to
for
admit that at that point.
No, it's not like.
Well, we will obviously.
There's no probing question or anything. She just says it.
Yeah, so we're obviously a bit taken aback because it looked like things were kind of going all right for her. Maybe she didn't want Andre dragged in for whatever reason, but it was looking like, it was looking like maybe things were pointing towards Andre Latour, and now she's just like, no, he didn't do it. He didn't clean the glass. I did. Just drops that little bombshell out of nowhere, so we don't really know why.
Yeah, and it's a bit of a frenzy in the courtroom, so once again, court is adjourned. And the next time we are back in the courtroom, things take a turn for the dramatic. So we return to the courtroom then the next time, and she is back on the stand again, because, it's back where it was left off. And Leo G. Carroll is asking her questions, and then a man walks into the room and passes on a bit of information, which kind of works its way around the courtroom. And Leo G. Carroll announces, somewhat in a harsh way, that Latour has done himself in. He has committed suicide, and this this changes everything. Yet the judge says that this has no bearing on the case, because everyone then starts making pretty rash statements, and the judge is like, let's just forget everything that was just said. Let's come back to things on the witness stand. And yeah, she admits to it. Just straight up admits to murdering her husband after Latour killed himself. Basically, she says that what's the point anymore? The man who she loves, the one man who she ever loved, is dead now. Therefore, what is the point? So she admits that she is the person who murdered her husband, and the shambles that he is, Anthony Keane then tries to scramble some sort of concluding monologue about how bad a job he did, and how everyone was saying he was doing a bad job, and maybe they were right, and he just kind of, like a loser, with his head down, just walks out of the courtroom through the crowd. And that, not the film being over, but that was the Paradine case, the incredibly interesting court case.
Was it though? No, so obviously Mrs. Paradine, once Tony figures out that she was in love with Andre, and that she basically killed her husband in order to be with Andre. We should say as well, Andre ultimately didn't want to be with her. He said he was too loyal to Mr. Paradine. That's kind of why he was refusing to leave. And that's why she asked Mr. Paradine to basically dismiss Andre, basically get rid of him from their employ, so that she could then be with him without kind of him necessarily having to be loyal towards Mr. Paradine. That's why she killed him. But anyway, once Tony finds out that she killed her husband in order to be with another man, he realizes that his feelings this whole time have been doesn't really understand what he was thinking of, and obviously then he's quite introspective. He's like, look, I've obviously done a terrible job in this whole case, which you think.
Yeah, pretty awful.
I think we could have told you that an hour and a half ago, buddy. But anyway, he starts to obviously then realise he's done a pretty terrible job. So Tony asks the court to let Mr. Collins, John Williams, to take over the case, and he leaves the courtroom in a daze. So then we cut to the judge sitting with his wife, the Oscar-nominated actress, is it?
Yeah, this is
Ethel?
where she wins the Oscar. Yeah, Ethel Barrymore.
Well, yeah, Ethel Barrymore. That's it. Yeah. So she says, look, she shouldn't be found guilty, even though she's admitted it. And Judge Horfield's like basically verbally accosting her, and he's like saying she killed her husband, blah blah. You can understand that, but then he clearly is like very controlling, insidious presence, because she's quaking like, I don't even know what you would say here. She's basically so timid. She's as timid as a mouse at this point. She's just clearly kind of afraid of her husband. Again, I don't really know what this scene achieved. I don't really know what this whole dynamic achieved, but I don't really know why it's in there.
No, basically he just says she's going to be hanged in 3 weeks.
Yeah, that's it. He says he's going to be hanged 3 Sundays from now. So she got the death penalty. She's going to be hanged. And then we
give her the Oscar.
Film, so Keen's, yeah, again weird scene, but it does establish that Mrs. Paradine's going to be hanged for a crime. So then we cut to the final scene of the film, which is Tony hanging out at Simon's house, feeling sorry for himself. He's obviously been having a few drinks, and he's like, look, don't tell Gay I'm here, I'm going to go home later, but for now I just need to drown my sorrows. But then Gay arrives and she says, look, Tony, let's go for breakfast. And she says, Tony, the most important moment of your life is now. Go back to work, go back to the law, and rediscover your magic. And yeah, that's the film really. So the final scene,
she tells him he needs to shave as well.
Yeah, shave. Yeah. So
yeah, I that's it.
That's the film. I mean, that's the final scene. That's the film. Yeah. Don't watch this film, guys. Don't watch this film, please.
Yeah. So straight into the review. I gave this film a 2 out of 5. I think it was generous, but I think like 2 out of 5. They made a film. It's got actors in it. They can act. There's some nice shots in this 2-hour boring court case. It's not a great film. I wouldn't recommend it. Even if you're like a Hitchcock fan. Like, unless you want to see all of his films, I wouldn't recommend it. This is right down there for bottom 2. Bottom 3 is generous. Bottom 2 Hitchcock films I've seen to this point. This is a boring slog of a film. And next week we are covering Rope, which is so fucking good. And I can't wait to talk about Rope.
So much better.
Yes.
Yeah, I gave this 2 stars.
What do you think of the Paradine case? Yeah.
Yeah, I gave this 2 stars as well, like yourself. I actually went 2.5, but probably a day or two after I saw the film, I'm like, no, that's not a 2.5 star film. I'm going to. Yeah, it's a listless film. I'm usually a fan of the kind of courtroom drama, the legal drama. That's a genre I usually really love, so I was kind of looking forward to this. And Gregory Peck, Charles Lawton, who was in one of the greatest courtroom dramas of all time in Witness for the Prosecution. Yeah, I was looking forward to this, but it's just so boring, so listless, so drawn out.
Boring ass movie.
The case is nowhere near interesting enough, like I said, to sustain probably to sustain a 90-minute film, let alone a 2-hour film. There's basically 1 or 2 characters at most who you can empathise with and sympathise with in this film. Yeah, guys, don't watch this film unless you're a Hitchcock completist. In which case, do watch it, but just be prepared that it's not the most exciting film you're going to see. So yeah, Rope next week is much more exciting, much more
one of Hitchcock's best,
easily, and it's like less than 70 minutes long, I think. So you could easily sit down and watch this
and it's in color.
And it's all in one take anyway. We'll talk about Rope next week.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think next week's episode is going to be a lot better. Certainly next week's film is going to be a lot better than the Paradine case.
Yeah, talking about a film this boring saps the energy out of you, to be honest. What are some good courtroom films? We've Witness for the Prosecution. Anatomy of a Murder is a good one.
Anatomy of a Murder is another one. JFK has a great courtroom scene at the end.
Yeah. Yeah,
it's not
true.
A courtroom drama, but it's a courtroom scene.
A Time to Kill? Is that the Matthew McConaughey one? A Time to Kill?
A Time. I was going to say that, yeah. A Time to Kill. That's a great film.
With that one line at the end. What is it? Now imagine she's black. Oh, that's exactly. Such a fucking great monologue.
Philadelphia is brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
Philadelphia is a classic film.
Go on, one more.
Let's throw another one in there if I can think of one. Throw me some actors' names and I'll try and think of. The Aviator isn't a courtroom drama, and it's probably not a great film, but there are a couple of great courtroom scenes in the film.
Yeah. What's the Jack Nicholson one?
Oh, A Few Good Men. Yeah, A Few Good Men is a classic courtroom drama. Yeah.
There we go. And then, of course, 12 Angry Men's after the courtroom.
Oh, 12, yeah. So, yeah, that's not a courtroom drama, but again, it's a legal drama if you want to call it that, because obviously 12 Jurors, 12 Angry Men might be the greatest legal kind of drama of all time, really.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, that was the Golden Hour Film Podcast. We have survived the Paradine case. Next week is Rope, a fantastic film which you definitely have to see if you like old movies. It's got Jimmy Stewart, it's directed by Alfred Hitchcock. It's got some great other performances in it. And yeah, I can't wait to talk about it. Fucking love that film so much. So yeah, thank you very much for all your support. Any likes or comments or shares or listens on Spotify or 5-star reviews on Spotify are appreciated. And that's it for this week. We survived the Paradine case.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.
And we shall see you next week.